to this Australian Open Life. G'day, welcome to this episode of this Australian Open Life. I'm the bloke who walks, and welcome to part 2 of our look at qualifying coming up for next year's Australian Open. This second part will be just having a look at the Traralgon ITF Juniors J1 qualifying tournament. Next, the Melbourne Wheelchair Open, the qualifying tournament. And then finally, we'll do a bit of a summary of the main events that everybody's really interested in. That's with all the international players going into Sydney and Melbourne and Adelaide. So just to let you know how this episode's going to pan out, I'm just going to give you a few details. Just look into the behind the scenes of the qualifying. Some of this information not easily, readily found, despite the technological, digitally driven age that we live in. So I figured, why not just delve a little bit into it for those people that are interested in these qualifying tournaments. There's a record 17 tournaments. You've possibly heard me say that before, but like me and the rest of the listeners, you're probably new to this channel, so welcome. The content, these episodes have been getting some great feedback, some very encouraging watch times and listening. The Player Watch, the Spotlight series is taking off the first couple of episodes. The news bites are getting good attention, and just quickly might run through a news bite around Ash Barty that's coming up. It's going to drop sometime this week, but might mention it again at the end of this episode. Ash's plans for the summer, because every Australian tennis fan is always interested in how she's going, any Australians going. So in this episode, we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're going a little bit off the grid. We know that qualifying, if we can bring something that's a little bit different, a little bit unusual and unique, there's plenty of room for everyone in these sort of channels and communicating this sort of information. And it's a great time of year in Melbourne, and tonight as we're recording, it's a balmy 30 degrees in Melbourne. Haven't seen much sun during spring. I'm pretty sure spring decided to skip Melbourne this year and take a break, probably like the rest of us for reasons well known, and we're not going to go into those. It's a continually evolving situation, but in all seriousness, just with the COVID situation, we're not going to be devoting probably any time to that topic. There's plenty of information about that around, and arrivals and international borders and how that affects tennis players, and we all know that a lot of them didn't enjoy the hotel quarantine situation last year. Thankfully, that's improved a bit this year, and the last week, as things are panning out, it seems that the latest variant, although something to be careful and watchful of, isn't going to impact the tournaments the way they did last year. But fingers crossed, and we don't want to jinx anything. So why don't you grab a cup of tea, put on your favourite pair of slippers or thongs or board shorts or whatever, and make yourself comfortable, and we'll be back after this break and take a look at the final 2 lead-in tournaments and wrap up the main lead-in tournaments interstate and in Melbourne. Okay, welcome back to this Australian Open Life, this part 2 of this episode. Just doing a little bit of a dig into qualifying coming up in January, and you might see on your screen, for those of you not watching the episode on the channel at the moment but listening through the podcast, the viewers are probably wondering why there's a tram playing in the background, and what has this got to do with the Australian Open. We'll fill you in at the end of this little segment. Actually, there is a tie-in, but there is a bit of cross promotion going on here. For those that don't know, I've got a couple of channels. This Life is a series. It's not just about the tennis. We've also got This Walking Life and This Public Transport Life, completely different animals and beasts. But I've got the footage there, and why not use it, because it does tie into the tennis. So the Traralgon ITF Juniors J1, it's running from January 12 to 19. There's 64 in the main draw, 32 in the qualifying draw. And one of the last recent tournaments was in Mérida, Mexico. It featured the Wimbledon boys finalist, Victor Lilov. Now, the actual main draw is released and up and running. And I can tell you the top-ranked player is the American Bruno Kuzahara, number 9 ranking in the world. There's a Croatian, a Czech, and a Peruvian. The Czech being Mili Polchak, the Czech Jacob Mensik, and the Peruvian Ignacio Buze, and a player from Hong Kong in the top 10, Coleman Wong, with a ranking of 24. Well done you, sir. And interesting to note that within the first top 8 places, the number 2 and ranked players ranked number 1 in their countries. Ignacio ranked number 2 in Peru, and remember this is the boys juniors. Remember, and from Lithuania, Edis Butvilas, ranked number 33 in the world, is number 2 in the country. So that's good to see that draw released. And there's another American, Ozan Kolak, ranked number 9, 9th seed, and just above the Mexican, ranked 11th in the tournament with a world ranking of 37. So it's good to see, great to see actually, that the juniors are travelling and playing and picking up where things were left off last year, which is great. Anyway, moving on as we board the W class free City Circle tram that circumnavigates Melbourne CBD in both directions. Perhaps for those that are overseas and unfamiliar with Melbourne and its tram network, maybe this will prove to be informative and enjoyable as we ride the tram around a little bit.
Depicting fairies and elves, and loved by children for generations. Cook's Cottage, the reconstructed house of Captain James Cook's parents, is also located here.
So the Traralgon tournament, the J1 Traralgon, is the AGL Loy Yang Traralgon Junior International, and as I said, running from the 14th. It's got here on the site the 14th to the 19th of January on a outdoor hard court surface. And just looking at the tournament info, I was looking for some prize money actually, but can't see it. Anyway, but there are also doubles. The main draw, doubles 32, the same for the girls. We might do that in a separate episode because we don't want to go on too long. And if you're after any information, you can call the tournament secretary on Australia +61 area code 03 5174 4626, and the website for the real information as opposed to me, traralgontennis.com.au, and the secretary or one of the officials down there will help you out. The major sponsors down there is AGL and Tyre Power. Not connected with our content, but it's because of them and the volunteers that this tournament can come to fruition and be what it is. And for all the tennis fans down in Gippsland in country Victoria, that'll be a great boon for them after we've all done it pretty tough during the restrictions this year in Melbourne. Country people a little bit more fortunate than those in Melbourne. The restrictions weren't quite as tough, but definitely getting into the Melbourne metro area if you had relatives, it was definitely a challenge.
A short walk from the next stop is Collins Street, with trams on routes 109 to Port Melbourne, 112.
So moving on to the Melbourne Wheelchair Open, and tournament that took place in February 2021. Produced a rare upset for the Japanese legend Shingo Kaneda, who doesn't lose often, and he lost in the wheelchair singles, the semi-finals, to Alfie Hewitt. And he was leading, the Japanese player was leading 12-8 in their rivalry. He'd won the last four, and in the last meeting was the US Open final. And it turns out the Japanese player fell to his opponent, and that often happens, doesn't it? That players that tend to dominate other players, eventually there is that breakthrough win for the player that's been taking all those runs of losses over an extended period of time. But the Melbourne Wheelchair Tennis Open is taking place out at Craigieburn, on the outer edges of metropolitan Melbourne, at the Hume Tennis and Community Centre. It's part of the Super Series in the ITF competition, running from the 15th of January to the 19th of January, and there's prize money of US $45,000. Paid in Australian, played on plexi cushion courts, and there's details on the humetennis.com.au and wheelchairtennis.com.au, the media fact sheet. Play starts at 11 o'clock each morning, is the scheduled start time, and there's also going to be twilight sessions held throughout the tournament. So if you're tied up with work or kids or babysitting or any other reason, that the twilight sessions might be for you. And if you're out in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, that's not a bad deal actually. Just can't quite see the ticket details here for the general public. But as I said, if you do have any queries, the best point of reference is wheelchairtennis.com.au and humetennis.com.au. And the Melbourne Wheelchair Open is the second of two international events being held at the Hume Tennis Centre out at Craigieburn. The other one we covered in part one of this delving into this qualifying tournaments, these leading tournaments. The other one, of course, is the Victorian Wheelchair Open. So we're finishing off this episode with a tour summary of the ATP and WTA Tour leading events. And I just want to recap basically, we'll just call it the Sports Fan Spotlight, the three big tournaments that everyone will be interested in qualifying, and also the elite level players that are jetting into the country, the top players looking to make a great start to the year, so that they can run out the cobwebs leading into the Australian Open. So the Sydney ATP Cup is January 1 to 9. In Adelaide, there's actually two international tournaments, and we spoke about the Adelaide International, the first tournament there, and that starts on January 1 until 9. That's a WTA 500 and an ATP 250 tournament. And for those that aren't that familiar with these different types of names, Challenger Tours and 500 Tours and 250, it basically determines how many points you're going to be awarded for each victory you have in the tournament, and how many points you're going to accumulate, and if you end up being the winner or the champion or a finalist even, you're getting more points for a 500, getting less points for a 250. But I'm sure there's plenty of people listening to this who are far more educated about how all that works than I am. And the third one, of course, is the Melbourne qualifying tournament, running from January 3 to 9, a WTA 250 and an ATP 250. So AO Grand Slam tennis, the Australian Open United by Play. It starts. It's only 5 more weeks now. January 17 to 30, and since we published and brought to you part 1 of this series, things are really starting to move fast. And the ATP Cup schedule has been revealed since I recorded the first part of this this episode. That the schedule has been released to the public, and it's Medvedev to open against Dominic Thiem, and he's the defending champion and world number 2, Daniel Medvedev, and that'll take place on Ken Rosewall Arena. Against Dominic Thiem, the Austrian former world number 3 and Grand Slam winner, broke through for his first Grand Slam a couple of years ago. And there's a Norwegian, Casper Ruud, in the draw, who's going to be taking on Novak Djokovic, and they'll be no strangers to each other. They met at the Nitto ATP finals. So there's some interesting matchups here between the different countries. The Canadians and Great Britain. Now, if you've been following the World Cup qualifiers in the soccer, you'll know that Canada is having a great run at the moment. They've beaten, and sorry, going off topic here a bit, they've beaten the Americans, they've beaten the Mexicans, they've beaten the Nicaraguans and the Costa Ricans. So can the Canadian men's tennis team pull off something similar at the ATP Cup? Great Britain against the USA. I like the British chances there, actually, because Cameron Norrie looks like he's going to be taking over that mantle from Andy Murray, and running with that is my feeling. Cameron Norrie has been pulling off some good results the last 12 to 18 months, and Australia's in the ATP Cup. We're going to be facing Austria at one point, Russia. The Russians are a danger for the Australians, I think, depending on what temperament the Russians show up with. Serbia and Chile, I'd go for Serbia there on January 3. And who's the other pick of the bunch? Greece and Poland. That'd be interesting there, with Tsitsipas leading the way. And just returning back to the Adelaide information. Gael Monfils is playing in Adelaide. Now, I just want to finish off here. I'll just launch into the next item of news about Ash Barty. As I just realised our tram ride has come to an end, so I'll just put up some other footage there.
Melbourne Park and Melbourne is driven by its
Just going a bit over time, but I know you might know.
Soccer, tennis, cricket, basketball and cycling are on show.
So we'll wrap up there. We've gone a little bit over time, and we'll just finish off with some items of interest about Ash Barty. And this we put up as a news bite a few days ago. There's going to be 9 of the world's top 10 players at the Adelaide International WTA 500, along with Ash Barty. It's players with around 15 Grand Slam titles between them. Garbine Muguruza, Karolina Pliskova and Victoria Azarenka, and isn't she having a golden run late in her career, still playing well. 12 Grand Slam titles those 3 girls have got, and you add the 2 that Ash has got. That's a pretty fair presentation of quality tennis right there. Ash had a great 2021. She won 5 tournaments, and she hung on to the number 1 ranking, and she's the 8th women's player since 1975 to hold the number 1 ranking in the WTA Tour for more than 100 weeks, and that milestone came up for her recently. And Ash has declared the Adelaide International her summer target as a way of warming up for the Australian Open. So what's your thoughts? Do you think Ash will be successful next year, or it might even be another Australian? Now, I've got great memories of Adelaide, actually. Hands up if you're one of the lucky sports fans back in the 90s who witnessed Pat Rafter take on Andre Agassi, the jet-setting superstar at Memorial Drive in the 90s. And that was when Pat Rafter had, I think it was just before or just after he won the US Open, and even on telly. That match was electric to watch. Unfortunately, Pat Rafter went down that night, but that was when Andre had decided to grace us with his presence in Australia again. Remember, there was quite a few years when he couldn't be bothered getting on his corporate jet coming down to the Australian Open. I think he came to regret it in his later years. So we'll wrap it up there. I just want to finish off by explaining what the hell is a tram doing in a tennis Grand Slam presentation. So for international people that have never been to Melbourne before, we've got a pretty extensive tram network, and around the centre of the city is a free tourist tram. But what we'll be doing in the next couple of weeks is just putting up some slightly off-topic content, something a bit out of the box, a bit unique, because there are free trams for our international visitors and regional and interstate visitors, that you can jump on a tram leaving the centre of Melbourne, and those shuttle services run from Flinders Street Station and all the way down to Rod Laver Arena, John Cain Arena. It's only about it'd be lucky to be 4 to 7 minutes. Almost an express service that'll drop you off at the door, and it's a free ride. All you need is proof of entry to the Australian Open, which is basically just your ticket, isn't it? So that's the sort of information that we're looking to share with the listeners and the viewers of this Australian Open Life. So we'll wrap it up there. You've been listening to this Australian Open Life. I'm the bloke who walks. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all your feedback. And if you've got the inclination, give us a like. A subscription would be great. It's been great and much appreciated to see the comments and the feedback, but also the watch time, which really helps drive the YouTube algorithm in our favour, which means that the content, if it's a like, a subscription, or you're watching most of the content, that's going to tell YouTube this is a channel to watch, something to be aware of, and it'll share our episodes with more and more people, because I know from the early episodes that there's a lot of traction for this sort of content. There's room for everyone, and we just want to share what we like about Melbourne in January, which is hot weather, great tennis late at night, and plenty to talk about the next day. I'm the bloke who walks. We'll catch you next time. This Australian Open Life is produced by Wise Words Media and Calumny Films.